everybody. Welcome back to Terrace Talk. Norwich City's Premier League start gets even easier, doesn't it, as they travel to the northwest this weekend to the Etihad Stadium to face no other than the Premier League champions Manchester City, which is quite a daunting prospect, I think, which we'll get into. Delighted to be joined by Norwich fan and freelance football analyst Jack Wright, and also One Football podcaster and content editor and Manchester City fan Dan Burke. Jack, let's start with you first and foremost. How are you feeling after that sort of game on Saturday against Liverpool, where you could probably sort of cut it up into chunks? The first half was probably okay. The second half, Norwich fatigued a little bit, and the defending was probably tired at best. You may choose to use other adjectives. How have you kind of reflected on that game in kind of the days that followed?
Yeah, I think it's very much a glass half full view of it. I think we need to take that because obviously we've had a troubled pre-season. We also know the issues with COVID and the players are out from that. So taking that out of the equation, obviously missing a couple of pre-season friendlies, I think it was inevitable that we were going to run out of steam, as you rightly say. I think there was enough positives from the opening, certainly 45 minutes to cling on to hope already. But I think generally, virtually every football fan, I'd imagine, who was inside a stadium for the first time in 18 months wouldn't pretty much leave with positive thoughts anyway. So probably wouldn't have taken too much for us to be able to come out with say, happy thoughts. And to be fair, I think we just wanted to see some signs of positivity, really. And I think there was definitely that. Obviously, getting some of the new signings settled in, and you could tell that from obviously Billy Gilmore getting on the ball, and as soon as he was passing the ball around, then the crowd were up for it, wanting desperately for him to kind of showcase his undoubted talent and ability. So, we didn't want to get pummeled. I think that was the first thing. Obviously, to take into another massively daunting second fixture. So, you look at the stats from it, as obviously I do in my day job, and it's 50% possession. Okay, Liverpool might have eased off towards the end, but even so, I think it was fairly even throughout the game. So we've got to take that as a positive, and certainly for those kind of ill-informed, I suppose, that were expecting Norwich to be chasing the ball this season and doubting why someone like Billy Gilmore would want to come to the club, thinking that he wasn't actually going to see any of the ball. That's a proof in point there straight away. Obviously, when we were last in the league, we were 8th or 9th as far as percentage of possession is concerned. So it's what you do with the ball, of course, that counts. But that in itself means that we've got those players in. Lemalu as well, obviously, had a great pre-season and showed signs of what he's about in that first game. So I think there was enough there from those players, and Rashica as well, especially, I think, showed what he has got and why we've added him into the squad, and the fact that he's got that pace and that ability to take players on and kind of break the lines. So that was good. You look at, say, the underlying stats and the XG, the expected goals on it was very tight. In fact, it was 1.33 for Norwich and 1.79 for Liverpool. So not a massive gulf there. And you look at some of the other games in the league that the opening weekend, and there was quite a gulf. We were certainly closer than potentially that 3-0 scoreline suggests. A couple of unlucky breaks we can put it down to, but I think Norwich fans, would want to see things that kind of were a progression from our last time in the Premier League, cutting out those mistakes, potentially leaving a 30-goal a season strikeout unmarked on the edge of the box. We want to limit those, but as you said, I think we can put that down to a disjointed pre-season, a lack of fitness, and so just running out a little bit of steam. But certainly positives to take from it, I think, over the 90. Yeah,
it's really interesting, kind of how you've broken it down there, because I actually went to Carrow Road last Saturday. We're kind of two thoughts in my head, really. The first, obviously, being the return of fans, and I'll get your take on that in a moment after we go to Dan. And also kind of looking for those green shoots, like those kind of glass half full moments that you've kind of spoke about there in terms of performance and in terms of the numbers as well from that performance. So, like you say, I think even though the scoreline, most people will see that, probably shrug their shoulders and go, well, that's probably expected. As you said there, I think this game had a lot of green shoots for Norwich that hopefully they can build on in the coming weeks when their fitness gets up to speed.
Attempts at goal, which I think, are at 3 on target. But, if we're getting in those positions to at least attempt, then if we continue that through potentially against the lesser lights with a bit more composure in front of goal. Obviously, Lucas Rupp had 4 attempts on Saturday. If that potentially was someone else, then we might get a little bit more, on target, and then you're looking at an opportunity. But yeah, absolutely, I think there was lots to take of positive from it, and obviously we move on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, let's come to you. You will have seen, I'm sure, the various images, various videos, match of the day, whatever, of stadiums being full again. Obviously, it's something that Manchester City are set to experience on Saturday for the first time. I don't know if you're going to be there. I think someone said you might be in Germany.
That's right, yeah.
So you well, I'll leave it to you to see if you're going to be there. But in terms of a spectacle and a sight, that must be a massive lift to Manchester City and kind of the players and staff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I won't be at the game. I am based in Germany, so I don't get to too many games these days. Certainly won't be going to this one. But I mean, I thought you were going to make a joke about our empty seats at the stadium for a moment there, which I would have let you off with, but fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is so happy to be back in stadiums, aren't they? All up and down the country. Just hearing the noise of the crowd on TV last week was fantastic, and the songs, and everyone really missed that aspect. It feels weird to think back to last season when we were playing in these sort of soulless, empty stadiums, this weird feeling of just like emptiness and desolation. It was quite nice for us because we watched our team march towards the Premier League title, and I suppose it's probably quite nice for you guys to see a team coming up from the Championship as well. But I think for a lot of people, they sort of fell out of love with the game a little bit last season, and totally understandably. It's just not the same, is it? It's just not. It sort of felt like watching people just like doing the jobs last season with no all the sort of soul and passion taken away from the game. So yeah, it's really great to have the fans back. I'm looking forward to watching the game on TV this weekend and hearing the Etihad in full voice. Hopefully,
I don't know if you've seen this. This is a slightly tongue-in-cheek question, but edible coffee cups. What's that about? What's that about?
Oh, don't get me started. I don't know. I mean, it's you might say that a club that's backed by oil billions, trying to do a environmentally friendly move is a little bit hypocritical, might you? I guess anything that sort of contributes towards the helping the climate crisis should be applauded nowadays. But I mean, there was a tweet yesterday that was saying that fans won't be forced to eat the edible coffee cups if they don't want to. They can still dispose of them, and it's like, well, if you're going to buy an edible coffee cup, you might as well eat it. It's a waste of food otherwise.
What's it going to be made out of? Any ideas? I don't know. I don't know what sort of material would be. I guess kind of like an edible paper, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't think it's like pastry or anything like that. That would be a bit weird, wouldn't it?
Well, my first thought was kind of chocolate, but then that would melt, wouldn't it? So you'd have to look for alternatives on that. But anyway, we digress. Jack Grealish, £100 million of talent. Let's get kind of the question I think that Norwich fans will be most keen. Harry Kane's not going to sign before Saturday, is he? Because that is a properly terrifying prospect.
No. It seems your former player Harry Kane won't be coming back to haunt you this weekend. Don't worry. Yeah, it seems very unlikely that is going to happen anytime soon. Possibly the final hours of the transfer window, if at all. Seems like it's not getting any closer. I think Spurs are very steadfast in their valuation of him, and City are hoping that they will sort of blink first and want to negotiate at some point. I mean, there are rumours that Spurs are trying to buy other players as well, almost as if they're lining up a replacement in case the worst happens and Kane does go. But I think they want about 160 million for him, and we're willing to pay about 120 million. So there's a bit of brinkmanship going on there, I think. But yeah, he definitely won't be playing this weekend. Grealish, I would imagine he will start after he started against Spurs and played pretty well last week. He looks like he's settled into the club quite well so far. So hoping to see some more chances created, and maybe chipping in with a goal from him this weekend.
Yeah, if you'd have told me when Harry Kane was on loan at Norwich City that he'd end up potentially being a £100 million player, I don't think many would have believed you. In Carrow Road wasn't his best loan spell, we'll put it that way, but a wonderfully talented player. Jack, were you at Carrow Road last weekend? Did you get to experience the first game back with supporters? And if so, whether you were there or whether you weren't, what was that experience like to see those seats full again, to see Carrow Road full again, and what did that kind of add to the atmosphere?
Yeah, it was incredible, wasn't it? So the Gillingham game was a little bit of a taster, having like 10,000 there for that. But that was the real deal. The build up towards it, obviously the game being of an evening as well. live on Sky. We had the build up throughout the day, obviously seeing the other clubs, and I took in the Manchester United game, and Leeds fans were in, despite getting the result they got, were still in the stand sometime after the game, still singing, and I think that just summed it up really. And yeah, for us, like that said, the build up towards the game was phenomenal. The start was just couldn't wait for it to begin, but kind of at the same time you're sort of soaking up that first time back in the stadium and seeing what you normally used to see on a match day. Cracking atmosphere. And again, obviously back in the Premier League was the icing on the cake for that, and obviously one of the big boys, one of the elite.
Yeah, absolutely. As Dan kind of summed up quite nicely, really, it was this weird situation where Norwich were having their best season ever in Championship terms, at least in terms of points, and yet nobody could see it. And there's kind of this sort of contrast that, and maybe I'll ask you both this to an extent: does winning a title behind closed doors not tarnish it as an achievement, but maybe disconnects you from it slightly? Is that kind of the view you had watching football over the last 12 months? I'll start with Jack, and then we'll come to Dan on that.
Yeah, I think everyone would want to be in the stadium as that momentum built throughout the season. Obviously, we started not overly well, so there was those doubts, given how we ended the Premier League season of 2 campaigns ago, how we then would kind of bounce back from that. And it started off, say, not overly confidently, didn't it? So it would have been interesting to see the dynamic in the stadium at that point in time, but the team were obviously allowed to settle. And then went on that fantastic run, which, say, from around Christmas time, never looked like we were going to relinquish top spot. So certainly towards the end of the season, you'd have wanted to be there for that, to soak up the atmosphere. I took it as a bit of a positive. I was clinging on to any positive that I could. But the fact that, we got to see a lot more of the games. So obviously a lot more on TV. The away games, the ones that you probably wouldn't have been able to get to so easily, certainly, and the ability to stream those games as well and watch and say have more content probably to get stuck into was the only positive, I suppose, we can take from it, and seeing more of those games. But nothing like being at a live game, obviously, especially with a full house.
Well, this is it. I suppose for you, Dan, being based in Germany, you probably got access possibly to a lot more Premier League games than you would in any ordinary season.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they show pretty much every game over here now, and it's a bit of a weird one for me because I've been over here for 4 years now, so I'm kind of used to watching games on TV now. So it's not. I probably didn't miss it last season as much as people who go home and away every week, and it's like something that really build their life around and build their social life around. At the same time, it was during the lockdowns. It was like all I had to live for, really. At one point, there was nothing else going on. It was I was living from match to match, and City really kind of stepped up for us last season and really gave us something to look forward to. They were sort of a beacon of hope in our lives at times, really. So, and when we did lift the Premier League title, there were 10,000 fans at the Etihad to watch that, so that didn't feel quite so weird. I can't imagine what it would have been like to see them lifting the trophy in an empty stadium, and the Champions League final. There were a few fans able to make it over for that as well. So it kind of worked out all right in the end. But yeah, I hope we never have to go back to that again because I really didn't enjoy that aspect of football at all.
Yeah, spot on. It was weird as Jack kind of painted there, just for media who were kind of allowed into those games behind closed doors, as I was fortunate enough to be for a few of them. Even your routine in terms of you have to get your temperature checked, you have to hand in this form. It's all very kind of difficult to get into a ground. As opposed to on Saturday where you just opened the door and walked in, it kind of felt like that. The difference was incredible, really. And I think it's something that we definitely won't take for granted again. Dan, just to come back to you, Manchester City have started their season, and I guess you could say they ended it with that Champions League defeat against Chelsea. Sorry to bring that up. Also the Community Shield defeat, and now a defeat to Spurs as well. So in terms of a start to a season, this isn't ideal, is it, for Pep Guardiola and Manchester City, particularly for their title aspirations this season, although it's only one game, of course?
No, it's a weird time for City at the moment, actually. I mean, the Champions League final was it was a great thing for us to get to the final. Our first ever final. We were so excited about that. The performance on the night was really disappointing, losing the game 1-0. And when City go 1-0 down in the big game, it's quite rare that they come back and turn it around. And watching City chasing one of those games is quite a painful experience to watch. And that result and that performance left a bit of a sort of dark cloud over the whole summer, really. And this kind of euphoric feeling that we had about winning the Premier League title wore off quite quickly. Then we go into the new season looking very undercooked, which is understandable. As you know, as Jack mentioned earlier, everyone's had a bit of a disjointed pre-season, and players go to the Euros. Quite a lot of our players played in the final of the Euros, so they've been coming back very slowly. And we went into the Community Shield, and that was a game that had its moments. You know, there were a few young kids playing and fringe players, and we played some nice stuff at times, but weren't great overall. Lost the game to a silly defensive error and a penalty at the end. And then you go into the Spurs game, and Guardiola had already sort of preempted it by saying, look, we're not going to be at our best for a few weeks here. We might show some flashes of brilliance. And they did against Spurs. The first 15 minutes, they were really good. And that was about it. After that, they were really poor. And as soon as Spurs went in front, it seemed like that was going to be it. And City were chasing the game and aren't good when they're doing that. You know, they tend to cross the ball into the box a lot, and teams can sit back with a low block and just bat them away, really. So, yeah, we're looking at our rivals for the title now, potentially. You know, the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea, all played really well, got really good results last week. They don't look as sort of underprepared for the new season as we do. So I think everyone's hoping for a really good performance from City that will against Norwich this weekend, that will restore some confidence, because it's a bit low at the moment, and especially since they released our new third kit last night as well. I don't know if you've seen that, but everyone's just like, what is going on with this club at the moment? Everything's going wrong.
Yeah, I think the less said about those kits, the better. Not great. You mentioned there, and it's quite interesting to get that perspective in terms of Manchester City being at their maybe a little bit short of confidence at the moment. From a Norwich perspective, I'm sure there'll be a lot of Norwich fans watching this feeling really rather encouraged by that, particularly obviously when you look at the squad list and the sheer amount of talent available to Pep Guardiola. But do you think, in many ways, you mentioned their confidence booster, that sort of thing, is that how they'll see this Norwich game, that opportunity to really kind of springboard on and so I guess sort of start their season in a sense?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't think. Guardiola, I think, is a huge admirer of Daniel Farke, isn't he? And he knows exactly what Norwich can do, and he'll be preparing for this as much as he prepares for a game against anybody, and he won't be taking anything for granted. So there's no sense of like overconfidence, like, oh, this is an easy 3 points. You know, we'll get this one out of the way and kick on. I think City will be nervous about what Norwich can do to them, and I think, you know, there's kind of similar styles of play as well. It's not like. When we play against a team who are just sort of lambs to the slaughter, I think Norwich are going to come and play football, and that is sometimes difficult for City when teams are like that. So I would like to think that we will come out and have a few players back, and some of the players playing last week will be a bit sharper, and we'll play a bit like we did last season, and certainly defend a little bit better than we did last week against Spurs. But yeah, I'm certainly not expecting a walkover for City. It's not going to be like the 7-0 game we had against you a few years back, if you remember that one.
Yeah. There's plenty of painful defeats, I think, at the Etihad that Norwich fans could certainly hopefully forgotten about. We tend to sort of look at the 2 wins in terms of that Johnny Howson goal at the Etihad, and obviously the one at Carrow Road a couple of years ago. But yeah, they've been on the end of some real beatings. And on that front, Jack, does what Dan has said there about low on confidence, maybe a little bit undercooked, disjointed. I mean, we could say similar things about Norwich right at the moment, but does that give you as a Norwich fan a little bit more confidence heading to the Etihad, that maybe it won't be as daunting as maybe we're all kind of preparing and bracing ourselves for?
No. You've got a feel for City, to be fair, haven't you? It's tough, very tough. I'm hoping that Pep probably sees it as an opportunity to, you know, showcase his ability to get what he wants out of the board, and another nil on the scoreboard for them, and they have to go and get Harry Kane. So that's what we can hope for. But no, we've got to go there and take heart from the fact that they have had if you take the Community Shield as a competitive game, then that's 3 back-to-back competitive 1-0 defeats. So pretty much unheard of in recent times for Man City. So you've got to look at how those teams went about that. 3 relatively different teams in different parts of their journey. So what Chelsea and Spurs especially, and it was interesting to see that Spurs kind of mirrored Chelsea's approach to the Champions League final, in that they played a front 3, but a very narrow front 3. So kind of again mirroring the Man City back defensive area, where they kind of keep it quite narrow and allow the width to be used by their wide players. So I think this is probably one of the first times where you look at the sale for us, obviously, of Buendia, and go, this is what it brings to the table, in that rather than having that one style of play where we obviously will go primarily through Emmy, we've now kind of come away from that and have been able to purchase 3 or 4 different players that bring different attributes. So I think, yeah, we can probably tweak things around a little bit, both prior to the game for our starting 11, and then have the ability to change things up, either if things are going very well in the game or not so well. So I think that'll be a key element to see how Daniel Farke does approach the game, and what that starting 11 will look like, and if the approach is a little bit different from what we're used to seeing.
Yes, it's interesting what you said there, and you kind of spoke earlier on about the breakdown in numbers, and we spoke about those green shoots, those sort of glass half full sort of moments in that Liverpool performance, and some of it, particularly when you look at some of the data, not all of it, but some of it suggests that Norwich City did do a little bit of the counter-attacking elements, perhaps a little bit better than they have done previously. So
yeah,
I think when you think of players like Milo Rashica and maybe what he can offer to Norwich's attack, someone who's a bit more direct, and he caused Trent Alexander-Arnold some real problems in behind, sort of in the opening first half, or the half of the first half.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's what Norwich City will look to exploit, that pace in the transition, try and use those attacking transitions to really hurt Manchester City? That's kind of what you've alluded to there.
Yeah, I think so. We have got the players to implement that now, certainly. And I think that if we can keep it kind of narrow as such and bottle up the middle of the field, then you're going to force Manchester to go wide. And I think Dan did mention it earlier that it comes to the point where they'll either come back into traffic or put a cross into the box. And certainly Grant Hanley and Ben Gibson, should they be playing, I'm sure they will be, would rather have that scenario rather than chasing a false 9 to the halfway line, etc. So, yeah, I think so. I think if we can keep it that way, and then look to exploit on the break. I saw Tottenham did, again, much a similar thing. Their front 3 was Son, more central, and they had Lucas Moura to the right and Stephen Bergwijn to the left, all primarily kind of wide players, but playing very central. But then with the ability to spin in behind and exploit the gaps down the sides of the central defenders, and also they're breaking the lines. They're getting in between Fernandinho and the defence quite regularly, to be honest. And to say, if we've got Rashica, who did show that against Liverpool, I think Josh Sargent would be a very interesting addition to the starting 11. I think he showed what he was about in his cameo. And obviously what we read prior to his signing was that he is probably one of those forward players that you will sign for their work off the ball and in the press as much as anything else. So I think that this game obviously is tailor-made for that type of player. So, I think either, believe it or not, instead of Pukki through the middle, or potentially as an option in a wider area.
That's really interesting, Dan. As obviously someone who watches a lot of Manchester City, and Jack has kind of really explained there how Chelsea and Tottenham went about stopping Manchester City. Is this now going to become a theme, do you think, for Pep Guardiola? Manchester City almost need to coach their way out of that to find a solution. Otherwise, we're going to get kind of what we're speaking about here, which is Norwich looking to replicate Tottenham, and then you have the next opponent trying to replicate what Norwich did, and then it becomes a bit more of a problem, doesn't it? Do you think Guardiola will tweak what he does in terms of trying to get around what the sort of setup that Jack spoke about there?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, he's pretty good at solving problems, old Pep. So I do back him to work it.
Yeah,
work
it's not for me to question him, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, last season they sort of solved the problem that they were having early in the season when they were getting broken against really easily and were really sort of flimsy, by sort of dropping the defensive line back a little bit, and Ruben Dias and John Stones were doing a lot of like winning duels and that kind of thing, which really helped. And the midfield wasn't under so much pressure then, because we do usually play with that single defensive midfielder. It was Fernandinho against Spurs last week, and he's 35 now. I don't really think he's got what it takes to play on his own in the middle in a game like that anymore. The alternative is Rodri, who isn't the most mobile player, but perhaps is a little bit more savvy in terms of like dropping off his man and not getting people charging past him all the time. So I hope he plays ahead of Fernandinho this week, and that might help things somewhat. I am concerned about the counter attack, especially after what you just said there, Jack. That is a problem that I think City are going to come up against again this season. I just hope that it's a case that we are perhaps creating some better chances this week. We do have players coming back in defence, the likes of Kyle Walker, who's really good against counter attacks because of his pace. Zinchenko at left back is a much better option than Mendy, who had a shocker against Spurs last week and has had a pretty shocking time at City overall, really. So those sort of players will be coming back in. You might see Kevin De Bruyne starting this weekend, which would be massive for us. I don't know if he's 100% fit yet, so he might end up coming off the bench. But even so, once he came on against Spurs last week, we looked like we had half an idea what we were doing in an attacking sense and actually started creating some decent openings. So, I think it's just going to be a case of City having probably 2 or 3 more weeks until they're sort of firing on all cylinders again, and then they can kind of work out how they're going to approach the rest of the season from there.
Yeah, it kind of feels from what you said there that Manchester City are probably in a similar boat to Norwich, where they're probably 2 weeks away from where they need to be because of that disjointed pre-season. Norwich for kind of COVID-related reasons, and Manchester City for what you said earlier for the Euros primarily. Just kind of zooming out on Man City a little bit, because it seems like a lot of the national discourse around Manchester City is around the Champions League and winning that. As a fan, how do you kind of see it at the moment? Because Premier League is obviously there to be won again. I think Manchester City are certainly most people's favourites for that. Chelsea, Manchester United, Liverpool, as you mentioned sort of earlier on. It seems like we're kind of going back to those days of having a proper top 4 again is kind of the way it feels like. So as a Manchester City fan, how do you view it this season? Where do you think Pep will put his priorities? Will it be on the league, the Champions League, both? How do you kind of see it?
I think the league is always their priority for Pep. I think he would say that, and a lot of people look into from the outside looking into the club seem to believe that the Champions League is the be all and end all for City, and I don't think it is. Maybe at board level there is more desperation to win it than among the fans. The fans would certainly love to win it, and we were certainly delighted to get to the final last season, and really gutted that we didn't win it, and hope that we can replicate that and go one step further this season or in the coming seasons. But I don't know. I don't know if you could prioritise a knockout competition in the same way you can with the league. I think if you're winning the league, you're on a great path to something. If you're winning the Champions League, you're not always necessarily the best team in Europe. It doesn't always work out like that. I don't think Chelsea were the best team in Europe last year, were they? I mean, they finished 4th in the Premier League and went on to win the Champions League. So I think, they've got to be aiming to win the league. I think it's going to be a lot harder this season. I mean, they basically took 3 months off at the start of last season and came back to win it somehow. They're not going to get away with that this time. I don't know how many points they're going to be able to drop, but it's not going to be that many. I think they finished with 89 last season, or maybe even fewer than that, which is, in terms of recent points totals for winning the Premier League, is not particularly impressive. They had a pretty poor home record last season, which is something they're going to have to improve upon. So, and you look at the teams around us, everyone's strengthened, everyone's looking good. Even Manchester United, who were the second best team last season, they're looking a lot sharper going into the new season. So there's a lot of pressure, and I think the pressure is definitely on City to win the Premier League above all else. And if they can win the Champions League or a cup competition, then that's just seen as a bonus, really.
Interesting stuff in terms of expectations, and obviously for Norwich, Jack, it's staying up, isn't it? This is the team that they played last week against Liverpool, kind of a 4-3-3 variation in and out of possession, of course, and that usual caveat. In terms of changes and how Daniel Farke will approach it, there's been a lot of talk about him potentially moving back to a back 5 or going back to that 4-2-3-1, which has served him so well throughout his kind of Norwich tenure. Looking at that 11 on the screen that we've got now, what kind of you've kind of alluded to maybe dropping Pukki out. Lucas Rupp, I guess, is probably a point of contention for other people. Looking at that 11, what changes would you make as Norwich head to the Etihad on Saturday if you were Daniel Farke?
I would keep Pukki through the middle, purely for his ability to run off the shoulder and say run those channels and exploit any areas that we can work into. No reflection on his performance against Liverpool or what he's produced over the last 12 months. But I'd probably take Todd out and bring Sargent in purely for the mobility and said the press and said just for the one-off game tactic, really. And probably, if he's fit enough, Kenny McLean in for Lucas Rupp.
Interesting stuff. Interesting. In terms of how Norwich will go for the rest of the season. Do you see them adopt? I mean, we kind of spoke about this earlier, and maybe how it's suggesting, and certainly their recruitment has suggested they're moving towards a more counter-attacking style. Is that something you see them adopting throughout the season? Do you see them being a bit more, or a few more variations in terms of opposition, and perhaps playing, as Daniel Farker, I suppose, has said, playing Burnley at home is a lot different to playing Manchester City away. So are you expecting Norwich to be quite fluid, quite flexible in how they approach this season?
I am, yeah, and I'm hoping we will be as well. I think one thing for Daniel Farker that we've learned from his time here is he is very studious. He loves to analyse. Obviously, he's got his team around that as well. And I think they would have taken a lot from our last performance in the Premier League and learned from it and know what they have to do to adapt to that. And I think, yeah, having the ability to change for a Burnley at home to a Man City away is crucial. And as I say, as much as we would have loved Emi to stay, his departure was going to probably mean that we were going to be able to have a better all-round team than kind of effectively, you know, for well, if we were going to any side in the Premier League that was our threat, they could sit on Emi and stop him creating, then we were going to be in trouble. So I think if we can spread that around the group now, then that will send us in a lot stronger stead. I think, you know, so where we were let down last week really was probably the final ball, and it was the killer. And so the XG stats kind of alluded to that as well. It was pretty close. It was just how we kind of linked up with the final ball into the box for the final shot. So that was obviously going to come with time on the training field and time playing together in match situations. So that side of it, I think, is positive with what we've got, and looking at the talent we've now got in those forward areas. Very exciting for the season ahead, to be fair. I thought, let's say, Rashica was certainly in that first half, or so first half of the half, was showed what he was capable of and added something different from what we've had before. Obviously, we're very much looking forward to Scholes coming in and showcasing his undoubted talent, and so hopefully he can transfer what he showed last season into this season. So we're excited to see him get some game time over the coming weeks, maybe not on Saturday, but over the coming weeks. And obviously our next signing will be the crucial one for me. That would be the CDM, how we fill that skip-sized hole. Because I think as much as we raved about him last season, we still probably didn't rave enough. He was such a kind of key element into what we could do last season. So without him, we're going to be different. Or without that type of player, we're going to be a different animal. So what they've got in mind for who that person is will be very interesting to see. Really looking forward to that, and so get that acquisition right. And I think we're going to be definitely competitive in the lower third of the league.
Dan, let's come to you. Manchester City at the home side on Saturday. How do you see this game going? And then, of course, I'll ask you for that dreaded score prediction as well. Are you confident Manchester City can get their first win of the campaign?
Yeah, I think we're going to be better than last week. I think it's just going to, like I said, it's going to take some time for City, and I think a week at this stage of the season is a lot of time for Guardiola to spend some time with his players on the training pitch and get his ideas across to them for how they want to approach things, get some more sharpness and freshness in the legs is going to be good. Having players coming back is going to be really good. I don't think we're going to see peak, City firing on all cylinders this weekend, but I think we're going to see an improvement, I hope. So I think it's going to be quite a tight game. I'm not going to go for a big scoreline. I reckon something like maybe 2-0 or 2-1 to City, Manchester City, that is. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good game, an entertaining game, and I'm just looking forward to seeing 3 p.m. Saturday football back in front of fans. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Really excited. First Norwich away day, isn't it? In kind of 18 months, really. So there's that aspect as well, Jack. From a Norwich perspective, how do you see? I'm kind of asking this with Red, really. How do you kind of see this one going for Norwich? And then, of course, I'll ask you for your score prediction as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an extremely tough task. We know that, goes without saying. I think, if we can stay competitive in the game, it depends on the fitness levels. Obviously, like we said last week, we just kind of faded. So they would have stepped up a little bit from obviously having the game and also what we've been training this week. If we can stay competitive, and obviously the first goal is extremely crucial. If we can get that and give us something to hold on to, then we will have a chance, especially given Manchester City's recent form. And I'm sure that the Etihad faithful will be a little nervous if we were to get a goal. And you can imagine it being, especially if it's goalless and we're frustrated for the first half, get one towards the end of the first half and send them in a half-time one down. It'll be interesting to see the reaction. So that, I think, has got to be our game plan. Keep it tight. It's easier said than done. Nullify what the threats are and I say try and exploit what we've got going forward on the break and be more clinical in the final third.
Go on then, score prediction. How do you say it?
Head or heart? My head's saying that we'll lose, and I'll go for 3-0. It's very way to
what's your heart saying? Let's end on that because that might be a bit more positive.
Yeah, it'll be more positive. Yeah, I'll go for a 2-1 win.
There we go, lovely stuff. So we've separated your head and heart. We'll see what's right. Hopefully, from a Norwich perspective, obviously, certainly hope your heart is right. That would be some result, of course. Yeah. Gents, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching. Leave a comment down below or wherever you're watching this. Your score prediction as well. It's a difficult task for Norwich City, but maybe not an impossible one. And that's maybe the encouragement we can take. Thank you very much for watching. Pinkun.com, of course, the place to go for all the latest Norwich City news and views. And we'll see you again very, very soon.